Today, April 16th. Today we've got something like 90 or so minutes worth of content, some great topics, some updates, some education. In general, I think, as you're listening, you're welcome to utilize the hand-raising feature if you'd like to ask a question, share a comment, start a new discussion, whatever it may be. I think typically that works better than saving everything to the end of a section. I'm going to kick off the meeting with I think a great safety moment here I found from our corporation. It's about distracted driving. Here's some tips to avoid being distracted when you're driving from things that are outside and both inside your car. This list mentions some really easy ways to be an attentive driver, such as getting your mapping or your CarPlay or whatever going to your destination before you start driving, turning off your cell phone or silencing it so it's not distracting. Things like closing your laptops, turning off tablet screens. I know we've all probably seen people when we're driving with their kid's tablet right up front of them, being a nice distraction. You can preset your radio stations, or maybe you have your Spotify or Pandora going in advance. There's things like not interacting with too much technology on the road, avoiding eating and drinking, and then also the classic, avoiding putting on lipstick or curling your eyelashes or whatever while you're at the stoplight. I think these are all good distracted driving notices that we could all take advantage of. Des, I think this is here for you.
Yes, thank you. For quarter one, we didn't have any action items. Usually I would go over those, but there weren't any, so I will just move straight to roll call, and I'll start with myself, Desiree Bickmore with Cascade Natural Gas, and I am the Energy Efficiency Program Specialist. And then I will go to Jody.
Hi, everyone. My name is Jody Albert. I'm one of the energy efficiency analysts for Cascade Natural Gas.
Thank you, Jody. Jacinda.
Good morning. My name is Jacinda Ashby. I'm an energy efficiency program specialist for both CNGC and IGC.
Thank you, Jacinda. Brian Farnsworth.
Yes, good morning. My name is Brian Farnsworth. I'm the program manager with TRC Companies on behalf of Cascade
Thank you,
Natural
Brian.
and Industrial Conservation Incentive Program.
Wonderful. Thank you. Byron.
Good morning. Byron Harmon from the Washington UTC. Happy to be here.
Happy to have you. And Kai, welcome.
Hi, my name is Kai Haidt, and I am a regulatory analyst with the Public Counsel Unit.
Thank you, Kai. Caleb Lee.
Hi, everyone. Good morning. My name is Caleb Lee. I'm an energy market consultant working under Ken Walter at ICF.
Thank you, Caleb. Joseph.
Oh, I'm Joseph Lennon. I'm an EE program specialist for Cascade Natural Gas.
Thank you, Joseph. Sheila.
Good morning. My name is Sheila McElhinney. I'm Senior Energy Efficiency Analyst at Cascade Natural Gas.
Thank you, Sheila. And Melissa.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Melissa. I'm a director at ADM Associates, a third-party evaluation firm. Thank you all for having me.
Well, welcome, Melissa. Thank you. Noemi.
Good morning, everyone. Noemi Ortiz, Energy Efficiency Programs Manager for Cascade.
Thank you, Noemi. Michael.
Hey, good morning, everybody. Mike Parvinen with Cascade's regulatory team.
Thank you, Mike. Peter.
Hi, good morning. Peter Crystalite, Senior Manager of Corporate Strategy and Stakeholder Relations at NEA, the Northwest Energy Efficiency Alliance.
Thank you, Peter. Stephanie Reed.
Stephanie Reed, Energy Efficient Analyst, Trade Ally Coordinator of Cascade.
Thank you, Stephanie. And Caleb Reimer.
Yeah, greetings, everyone. I'm the program manager for Cascade's Energy Efficiency Department, focusing on Washington.
Thank you, Caleb. Brian Robertson.
Hey, good morning. I'm here joined with Bailey Brian Robertson, Supply Resource Planning Manager with Cascade. And I'll let Bailey introduce herself since we're in the same room.
Hi, everyone. I'm Bailey Steves. I'm an economist on the resource planning team working under Brian.
Thank you, Brian and Bailey. Glad to have y'all. Shaylee.
Good morning, Shaylee Stokes. I'm Director of the Energy Project based out of Washington State Community Action Partnership.
Thank you, Shaylee. Ken Walter.
Hi, good morning, everyone. I am an Associate Director with ICF, lately EEG, but prior to our acquisition. And I led the CPA modeling effort for the Conservation Potential Assessment that is almost, but not yet complete for Cascade.
Wonderful. Thank you, Ken. Quinn.
Quinn Weber, Regulatory Analyst with the Washington UTC.
Thank you, Quinn. That is roll call for now, and I will just hand it over to Caleb.
Excellent. We'll get started here like normal. Just a reminder to all the participants, please utilize the electronic hand raise feature if you've got a question, comment, concern, whatever it may be. And it'd be great if you introduce yourself with your name and which company or team you're working with or representing. We'll get started here just like normal with an update of the first 3 months of the year, so January through March. And I'll kick it over to Brian to talk about the commercial program.
Thank you very much, Caleb. Again, my name is Brian Farnsworth. I'm Program Manager with TRC Companies, and we are the implementation contractor for Cascade's commercial and industrial program. So today I'm going to be providing a through Q1 2025 update, so the first 3 months of this year. Just first, as always, a reminder that these numbers are estimates at this time. They've not gone through our rigorous measurement and verification process at the end of the year, so keep that in mind. But through the first 3 months of the year, we have saved around 13,000 therms, and we have delivered around $87,000 in incentives to Cascade Natural Gas CNI customers. That is across 24 natural gas savings measures that were completed through Q1. A couple of those customers, the larger projects would be Grandview School District, Gale Physical Therapy, and Living Faith Victory Church. Next slide, please. Okay, so I'm going to go over some of our outreach and marketing activities for the first quarter. So we have been working with a Google Performance Max campaign. You can see some of the impressions there. 11,900 impressions in January, and that led to about 570 website clicks. Continuing into February, we saw another almost 7,000 impressions and 378 website clicks. We've also been working with a company called Dodge and a database that essentially can target pending construction permits and renovation permits. So we're trying to find customers when they're currently in the process of applying for permits, considering upgrades, so that we can make sure that they're aware of our incentives and that we can incentivize their projects. So that was sent. It was an email blast that was sent to around 2,000 contacts, basically spanning ESCOs, contractors, and the customers themselves that were applying for those permits. We did see a 41% open rate on that and a 3% click rate. So hopefully some of those will materialize into projects this year. We are also continuing to reach out to our trade allies, which are essentially contractors that are formally vetted by the program, associated with the program. And we're essentially delivering them a trade ally packet. It's essentially, welcome to the new year. We hope you're familiar with the program, that you're continuing to offer these incentives to your customers. We delivered packets to customers in Zone 2, which is essentially the Kitsap Peninsula area, late last year. And then this year, I believe it was in January, we sent out the Trade Ally packets to Zone 3, so essentially our Eastern Washington customers. So we're hoping that's going to lead to additional engagement with those trade allies. And then lastly, we've been working with several print and display ads, but we wanted to call out the Tri-Cities Journal of Business. So we're running ads with them in April, basically focused on water heater upgrades and other incentives from Cascade Natural Gas. Next slide, please.
We actually have maybe a comment or a question from Quinn, if you'd like to share.
Okay, absolutely.
Hi, Brian. Quinn Weber, WUTC. I was wondering what, if you could go a slide back, what the whether or not the therm saved incentives, where do they kind of match up with what you expected for Q1?
I'm going to be getting into that more deeply in a moment, but yes, the therm savings are not up to our standard for the beginning of the year, so we are having a sluggish start to the year. But we're going to dive right into those numbers, and then we're going to talk about a plan to increase engagement with our customers later on.
Good question, Quinn.
Perfect. Okay, yeah, so getting into that here, you can see that in terms of our progress to goal for 2025, we are at 3% to goal. So that is lower than we would like to be. Basically, that is mostly a deficit in January and February. We weren't at quite where we wanted to be with 13,000 therms. Or I think it was 11,297 therms for March. But really, we had low therm savings months in January and February. And so we have developed a plan, which I'll be addressing later, of how we're going to make up that deficit for the rest of the year. Also, keep in mind when you see this comparison at the Q1 total for 2024, which would have put us at 51% to goal. Remember last month we had discussed, or I guess last quarter we discussed that there was a timing issue of processing incentives where there was a discrepancy between are they going to be counted towards 2023 or 2024. They ultimately went into the 2024 bucket, so it's artificially raised 2024 to look a bit higher than it would normally be. And then you can see that in terms of this year, if you add to what we've already accomplished and then what we plan to accomplish for the rest of the year, at least therms and projects that we've identified, that would put us at about 76% to goal as of today. And so, yes, like I said, we'll talk about our plan to make this up. And then below, you can sort of see how we identify therms in the pipeline. So essentially, the far left side of that chart there shows a pre-pipeline, which is essentially actual projects that we've identified, applications received that are our sort of formal, what we call a pre-pipeline. We're discussing maybe possibly changing how some of these are named. Then you can see our therms achieved, which is actual projects that have been processed already this year. And then our therms forecasted, which is essentially an average of what we typically see in standard and prescriptive measures over the course of the last 10 years that we've averaged out what we see per month. And that's sort of just a forecast of what we anticipate processing over the rest of the year. And then the therms remaining to goal would be the 106,000 therms, which we're hoping to achieve, and then identify those projects as well. So next slide, please.
It's also worth noting for those in the call, they'll recognize it's about a 20% increase from the 24 to 25 therm saving goal total. So that's also a contributing factor here, and one of the things we'll be talking about coming up.
Okay, so then looking at the trend line to goal, basically, the dark sort of green color is 2025, so you can see we're low relative where we'd like to be, and then you can see how hopefully we plan to make that up. And as of June or July, that's where we'd like to be. You can see that trend line to goal. And then in gray, you can see what was actually happened last year, so hoping to match that trend line there. And then beneath that, you'll see our biennial therms forecast. And essentially, most of the deficit, the remaining to goal on the right, is the rest of this year's goal. So depending on how this year goes, and hopefully we'll make up January and February and get back on track, and we'll be able to start to target that 424,000 therms. Okay, so when I mentioned the therms, the 24 measures that we had processed this year already, this is a chart that essentially shows the measure distribution. So you can see, and not surprising, boilers represent the largest portion of the therm savings, as well as insulation. And then another measure category that is typically right up there also is custom. So we should see many more custom incentives throughout the year. So that'll even out, where hopefully we'll see boilers, custom, and insulation representing the lion's share of our therm savings for the year. So. Okay, so to address the slow start to the year, we have been working in conjunction with Cascade Natural Gas and TRC to establish essentially an adaptive management strategy. We have been looking at some extenuating circumstances that we want to address first and are just trying to explain and provide possible causation for the slow start to the year. So I'm going to address each of these. And again, if you have any questions, if you have any contributions or any other ideas which can contribute to this, we'd love to hear them. But basically, we've been looking at a sluggish economy in 2025. It started, I would say, 2024, late 24 sometime. But this year, we've certainly seen a sluggish economy. I think the S&P 500 alone is down 15% on the year. So that could certainly be contributing to companies in Cascade Natural Gas Service Territory and their trepidation, essentially, to make investments in infrastructure and new buildings and equipment for existing buildings. We've also seen inflationary pressures. So in addition to a sluggish economy, we've seen costs rising. So this is not only cost of goods, this is cost of services, this is cost of transportation. So these are, battles that we're fighting in order to try to, get these companies to adopt new upgrades. Then most recently, we've also seen tariffs. And these tariffs are certainly affecting our customer base. So again, there's uncertainty for investments. They're looking at cost increases from inflation. And now on top of that, from tariffs, we have seen we had a heat recovery laundry project at the Hilton Garden Inn in Eastern Washington. And we were just notified that due to the tariffs specifically, they have decided to cancel that project. I want to say that was around a 20,000 therm project, decent chunk for the year. That was actually one of my personal projects. That was disappointing to see that fall off the radar there. And then lastly, we've seen a push to electrification. This has been going on for several years, but it certainly affects several different areas in our service territory. I think notably the Bellingham area, and then in Eastern Washington as well. We've just been seeing a lot of heat pumps, which essentially make any space heating incentives ineligible. If they have a combo natural gas heat and electric heat, it makes those natural gas upgrades, makes it so that we're not able to incentivize those. And another example that we can point to is Skagit Valley College is a customer. I should have provided an incentive estimate over the last 15 years of how many projects we've incentivized for them, but I know we've worked with them in the past. And we were contacted by their ESCO, McKinstry, who just wanted to notify us that all 12 of their buildings on their campus are going to be completely electrified. So all natural gas equipment is being removed and replaced with electric equipment. So that's just another challenge that we're facing. We're not sure what percentage of our customer base is affected by this, but it certainly is a concern and could be responsible for some of the decrease in projects that we're seeing. So I can pause here briefly if there's any questions around our, sort of some of the issues that we're facing currently. If there's not any questions, then we can move forward to the next slide.
We'll give it a second, see if there's any conversations to be had here, but it's something it's hard to overstate the importance of this, of pairing a very aggressive 20+% increase year over year to our therm savings goal on the C&I side, paired with some of these extenuating circumstances like tariffs, these things that companies were working with for sometimes multiple years for their projects. Something comes down the line and it just vaporizes itself, which is really unfortunate for the customer, unfortunate for the company, but also unfortunate for our therm savings goal here. We talked with the main engineer for TRC, Bob Cootie. He's expecting more of these conversations, cancellations, delays, minimizations from tariffs and other questions about where to get the products, where to get the equipment from. It's a difficult time right now for TRC, and I compliment Brian's team for having these adaptive management strategies in place. Peter.
Yeah, thanks, Caleb, Brian. Yeah, this is tough. We've kind of been worried as well on market actor side and all the folks we work with and manufacturers and everyone through all the supply chains. I'm curious if, and you kind of answered the question, I think, a little bit with what TRC is hearing, and I'm curious if you're hearing other things from customers and just the uncertainty and if they're just decision making around delaying or canceling projects, if you've heard any more from other folks aside from the Hilton Garden Inn.
That was the first project that was a direct result. That was a direct notification to us of a cancellation. I don't have any other specific examples. We've been talking internally, about it's just too bad we don't have a study to point to. I think it's kind of too early for that type of analysis to be done, given that it's happening right now. But yeah, I know there has to be an effect. We'll certainly, keep everyone in the loop if there are any other cancellations of, currently forecasted projects. Obviously, we're hoping not. But you'll see when we get to the next slide. This is just the start to the adaptive management. This is just providing essentially what we're seeing that could provide, some reasoning for the slowdown. But in the next slide, we're going to be talking about what we're going to do about it. So, which I think it's always good to be looking forward. So,
great. Thanks, Brian. Thanks, Caleb.
Absolutely.
Thanks. Good insight from Peter. And Peter's with NIA. NIA, I know, is spending a bunch of time and resources trying to figure this out, and they're helping our organization. So thanks for that, Peter.
Yeah, you got it.
All right, we'll go to the next slide, Brian.
Perfect. Thank you. Okay, so we've identified a little bit of the problem. Now we're going to talk about what we're going to do about it. So in terms of our adaptive management strategy to sort of combat these extenuating circumstances, we are not only going to be doubling the number of typical activities in terms of marketing and outreach, but we are doubling the number of dollars spent also. So we've essentially developed an addendum to our marketing plan. Is soon going to be submitted to Cascade Natural Gas. It was developed by our marketing manager. Very excited about what she's put together. But most of what we're proposing is summarized below. So I'm going to just briefly touch on each of these points. Essentially, so we're going to be looking at LinkedIn ads. So we're going to be targeting owners of facilities in Cascade Natural Gas territory. We're going to be targeting owners of trade ally partners, other construction companies, owners of ESCOs, just all of our sort of industry partners. We're going to be trying something new and looking at LinkedIn, and we're going to be advertising to those folks. We're going to be looking at geofence ads. So this was new to me, but essentially where we're going to be essentially working events and networking, doing conferences, events, that kind of thing, we are going to do geofence ads, which essentially can cast a virtual net around attendees at events and advertise the program to those folks. So we're excited for that and to try something new. That's something that marketing had proposed, and so I'm excited to try that out. We have a lot of events planned for the year, and we're hoping that this sort of innovative strategy can help reach some of those folks that we plan to network with. We have also joined Building Potential. Essentially, they work in partnership with the Smart Building Center and Building Operator Certification, the BOC program. So essentially, not only is that going to be a great new regional partnership for us, but we're also, by partnering with the Smart Building Center, we're going to be offering kind of a unique perk to our trade allies in our service territories by offering them to be able to loan out just some really high-end and innovative equipment from the Smart Building Center at no cost to them. So we're very excited for that and to be able to advertise that to our trade ally partners. And then the building operator certification, I'm not sure if you're familiar with this, but essentially this is building operators at facilities in Cascade Natural Gas territory can go and seek training to basically learn how to better operate their facilities and how to operate their facilities more efficiently. And so by partnering with them, we're going to be able to sponsor these trainings. So our team will be able to basically present at these lunch meetings and make sure that the participants there are familiar with our program. So we're excited for that. We're also going to be sponsoring contractor happy hour events in all three Cascade Natural Gas service territory zones. So essentially, we're going to be finding a facility and restaurant bar type thing, and we're going to be offering free drinks and appetizers, and we're essentially going to be doing giveaways and that kind of thing, just as a way of saying thank you to our contractors and to have some of our paperwork there and just find ways to reach them and make sure that they're familiar with our incentives and that they're advertising them to our customers. We are going to be looking at bulletin boards and billboard ads. So this is not something we've done before, but we're going to be looking at some of the more traveled roadways in all three of our zones. So Northwest Washington, down the Kitsap Peninsula area, and then Eastern Washington. And we're going to be trying some billboards that are going to be promoting energy efficient measures. So we're excited to be trying that. And then lastly, we're going to be doing some small business mailers. So yeah, we're going to find some of our more effective and popular measures, and we're going to be promoting them in the form of direct mail to some of our small business customers. So again, I can pause briefly here if any questions about these ideas, or if you have any other ideas that you think would be unique. But in order to kind of factors we had discussed on the prior slide, this is on top of all of our marketing that we're already doing, which I probably should have summarized some of that as well. But yeah, this is extra on top of all of that. So we can always come back to it. Okay, so next slide, please. Okay, I think this is the last slide. So we're just going to go over some of these very briefly, but this is just a sort of some insight into some of our forecasted projects for the year. One thing I wanted to call attention to are the first two bullet points here, and we're actually really getting into the ag space, and more specifically indoor greenhouses. So a new measure for us is going to be greenhouse curtains. And these first two are examples of that. The first two are actually marijuana growing facilities, but we do have a cut flower facility too that's not on here because I don't have the details yet. But we are looking at a 150,000 square foot facility in Bellingham for cut flowers as well. So we're going to be looking at an innovative measure and really trying to break into a space, indoor ag, which we've not delved that deeply into in the past. So very excited about that. But yeah, we have Suspended Brands in Belfair, and then we have Free Reign Farms in Bellingham, both looking at some heat curtain technology that we're very excited about. And then moving down the list, we have a number of school districts. So we have Pasco School District, Longview School District, and Sunnyside School District. So a number of projects there. And then as a continuation from last year, we do have several additional projects at Safeway and Hagen grocery locations. So I believe those are refrigerated doors. So we're excited about the continuation of working with that customer as well. So I believe that is the end of my update, unless anyone has any questions.
We'll give it just a second here, but I just want to compliment Brian for sharing all these adaptive management techniques, talking through some of the extenuating circumstances that we're currently experiencing with the administrative, economic, all those things. The Cascade internal team is also looking at our conservation potential assessment, both forward-looking and retroactively, looking at both the cost effectiveness and achievability of those goals and targets, with this new information that's coming out at hand. So there could be some conversations, either on an ad hoc basis or via email for this group here in the future to share. Not quite sure yet. But if you've got any insight, any thoughts for us in the meantime, my contact information is pretty easy to find. You can always reach out and have a one-on-one meeting if you don't want to share right now. I think that's excellent, Brian. I'll say thank you and we'll keep moving.
Perfect. Thank you for having me.
Excellent. Okay, we've got our residential program highlights. This is going to be a bit of a shorter section here. This is going to look like a pretty common graphic for those on the screen. This is an update on the Q1 2025 totals and comparisons to the prior year. You'll notice 2025 for the first 3 months, January 1 through the end of March, in green. Then comparing it to a similar time frame back in 2024. In general, all this information is fantastic. You'll see that we achieved just under 160,000, once again unverified, therms in the first 3 months compared to about 145,000 last year. As a reminder, 145,000 was a record. 2024 was a record year for the program, and we're ahead of that pace. So I can't just say enough great things about our team, our processing specialists who are moving through projects, learning new things, and most importantly, there's a bullet point below, adapting to a new processing software, which is ERA, Enterprise Rebate Application. There's been a lot of positives there, but also some pieces to keep working out. So that's a continual just time and resource investment sink, and it's really not impacting our program's results on paper. So just compliments that whole team for being nimble and navigating that. Otherwise, you'll notice that we were ahead of pace for the goal in terms of therms, but we're also ahead of pace in terms of the incentive, which is the expected one-to-one comparison. I only bring that up because there is a condition in our biennial conservation plan's conditional acceptance documents. If we're expected to go over or under 20% of our annual budget to notify this group, I'm expecting it to happen again this year. Same thing as last year, just because we're ahead of our therm saving goal. In terms of what the projects are, it's a similar story to 2024. Attic insulation and air sealing are very popular measures. We're seeing a lot of duct sealing and duct insulation. And then, of course, some standards over the past few years, 95+% furnaces, also 98% AFUE, as well as both programmable and smart thermostats. Something I didn't have on the screen, which I actually wish I typed in there, it's also just a recognition to one of the main sources for these therms, which is our point of sale program, working with our trade allies to provide upfront instant rebates from the customer's perspective. And Stephanie Root, who's on the call, received an official promotion to a new role that Cascade created and devoted for the importance of that program and helping us grow in the future. So I just want to say again, Stephanie, congratulations. It's well earned, and we're already reaping some more rewards from that extra resource. So thank you, and thanks to the team for that.
Thank you, Caleb.
Pie chart here. You love seeing a lot of green on this pie chart. Math makes it pretty obvious that we're about 62% of the way through the year with 70% of our biennial therm saving goal on the residential side on the screen here. That 928,000, I believe, is the highest 2-year residential goal we've had, and we're ahead of pace. So that's just fantastic news. I don't have a overall biennial goal pie graph here, but right now we're looking like we have the potential to meet our biennial goal. That's in spite of some of these headwinds that we're trying to navigate and deal with. Once again, there's no certainty there. Projects could come or not materialize. But right now the program is looking pretty good in terms of our biennial progress. Are there any questions or conversation we'd like to have on the residential side? Otherwise, we're going to move forward with Melissa's residential E&V update. Okay, I'll call attention to Melissa and Jody. Jody, if you'd like to share any work or any updates here, and then we'll run with this presentation.
Hi, everyone. So we have an exciting update today. We welcome Melissa from ADM. Melissa is going to be sharing updates on our residential envelope impact evaluation. These results, we're going to use them to inform both our in-progress 2025 CPA, or Conservation Potential Assessment, and our overall 2026-2027 program plan. So Melissa, I will hand it over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Jody. Cool, thank you. As Jody mentioned, my name is Melissa Kosla. I'm a director here at ADM Associates, a third-party evaluation and consulting firm based out of Sacramento. And today I'll be presenting the results of the impact evaluation we conducted with Cascade, specifically the residential envelope measures. We've been working with Cascade staff on this evaluation for the past several months, so I'm excited to share these results with you all in this meeting today. Next slide. Okay, so to provide some organizational context for this presentation, we've outlined high-level focus areas. First, we'll outline the evaluation timeline of previous evaluations we've completed, as well as current and future evaluations planned. We'll expand on the evaluation scope for the work, objectives, and methodology. The results we present today will focus on single measure impacts, but we'll also touch on the relevance of bundled measures, such as popular combination of measures installed simultaneously in a household, and the distribution of those combination of measures. Then we'll go through a high-level overview of the verification methods and results in terms of therms and realization rates. And then finally, we'll present our conclusions and recommendations resulting from this work, leave additional time for questions, and then outline the next steps planned for this evaluation. Okay, so here is provided the realization rates from the previous evaluations, as well as the current and upcoming evaluations. In 2022, ADM completed an evaluation of space heating, water heating, envelope, food service, and custom commercial projects, which resulted in a realization rate of 94.5%, very closely aligned with CNGC estimates. This evaluation was completed by billing analysis. In 2023, we completed an evaluation of space heating, water heating, smart thermostats, and clothes washer measures for the residential sector with a realization rate of 121.1%. And that's mainly due to the higher than estimated or expected verified savings for residential furnaces. And in this presentation, the 2024 evaluation consists of the residential envelope measures. And for the upcoming evaluation period, we're working with Cascade to conduct an evaluation of various low income measures. Okay, so this slide outlines the measures as part of this residential envelope analysis. The measures evaluated include windows, doors, insulation, duct sealing, and air sealing. Our goals for this evaluation were to measure and verify savings, whether by deemed savings verification or billing analysis, where billing data and participation were sufficient. We also used the results of this analysis to develop unit energy savings estimates for Cascade to use as estimated savings values for future program year participation that aligns with observed energy savings for Cascade's actual customers in service territory. And unlike some of the previous evaluation efforts, this evaluation didn't include a process evaluation for this scope. Next slide, please. Thank you. So this slide provides a quick outline of the two savings analysis methods that we employed for the single measure analysis. The first method is the pre and post regression billing analysis, where we compare 12 months of monthly energy consumption, 12 months prior to the weatherization measure install, and then 12 months after the weatherization install. So comparing that pre-period and post-period to see where those impacts, where that treatment effect lies. And our model regression here includes controls for weather as well as R value differences for insulation measures. The second method we explored for some of these measures was deemed savings analysis, referencing the Regional Technical Forum measure workbooks, which have a lot of sufficient and supporting data backing those values. Next slide. Okay, so in this evaluation, we focused on evaluating households that installed a single measure between 2018 and 2024. This is due to the fact that households installing multiple measures, such as bundled measures, may demonstrate interactive effects. An example of this would be the savings a household would observe in their monthly bills if they installed air sealing and duct sealing together would be different than the sum of the savings of the household would see if they installed air sealing separately and then duct sealing separately. As each iterative measure install reduces that baseline leakage of the home and therefore affects the incremental savings. As we highlight in the next steps of this presentation, further down, we plan to conduct a secondary EMV and share results on those bundled measures. But for the remainder of this presentation, we'll focus on a single measure. Sorry, can you go back one slide just for a second? Thank you. So the table at the bottom of this slide highlights how many customers are installing individual measures. In total, 2,944 households were included in the individual measure evaluation. Again, that's between 2018 and 2024. And so we can see that sharp decrease where we're just isolating those individual measures, as most customers are actually installing bundled measures. Next slide. Okay, so these figures kind of display what I was just mentioning, that a lot of customers install multiple measures, and the relevance of those measures, which are likely to display interactive effects. The figure on the left highlights how, so each of those little figures is an individual program year spanning from 2018 to 2024. So in the top row of that left figure, we can see that most of the measures installed are just a single measure, that first column. And then once we hit 2022, 2023, and 24, we see that 2 measures and above greatly outpace the single measure installations. So we're seeing more customers installing multiple measures at the same time through the program. The figure on the right highlights how air sealing and attic insulation, demonstrated by these large orange-red bars, is by far the most commonly occurring measure combination installed in the past 2 or 3 years. This figure presents the 20 most commonly occurring measure combinations, all of which occurred at least 35 times between 2018 and 2024. So there still are a few different combinations that aren't included here that were less likely to be installed. So this is important to recognize in the program, as the interactive effects may be significant and useful to estimate moving forward. Therefore, I'll touch on that further in the next steps of the evaluation in a few slides. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so this slide presents the methodology and source used to calculate savings for each of the individual single measures. The air sealing, duct insulation, and high efficiency door measures were all verified using the Regional Technical Forum workbooks because there wasn't sufficient participation or pre-period billing data to complete a billing analysis for them. Where we see a large drop between the tracking data count and the valid billing data count, those 2 columns on the right. The drop is mostly due to lack of sufficient pre-period billing data, indicating that customers are likely to install these specific measures less than 1 year after moving into the home, and therefore we don't have sufficient pre-period billing data to do that pre-post regression analysis. We did complete the pre-post analysis for attic insulation, duct sealing, floor insulation, and the wall slope ceiling insulation, as well as window measures. Next slide, please. Okay, so this slide presents the single measure impact results. The 100.9% realization rate at the bottom of this chart is very promising, and our results aligned with Cascade Natural Gas total measure savings. But it's important to note the balance of high and low realization rates of those individual measures, as we can see in this table, contributes to this near 100% realization rate. So in summation, these insights from the individual measures allow the group to reduce the gap in some of these measure level savings estimates and improve future measure level realization rates. So some of these realization rates are lower than or different than 100% due to sometimes not having the square footage value in the tracking data to verify the pre and post difference in verified savings for the deemed savings methodology. And then in the measures that we completed a billing analysis for indicated higher than expected verified savings based on the customer's bills. Next slide, please. Okay, so our findings from this evaluation work highlight that the 100.9% realization rate indicates Cascade's overall ex-ante claim savings is very much aligned with ADM's verified savings calculations. However, to improve individual measure realization rates, ADM suggests Cascade consider collecting additional data for air sealing, high efficiency doors, windows, and duct sealing. This could include collecting a sample of projects with pre and post CFM 50 values, a sample of square footage for the projects which are installing doors, the U factor for windows prior to window retrofit, and the pre-post CFM 25 for duct sealing projects. So this is some of the information that was lacking in some of the projects that could improve the accuracy for our verified savings estimates and could explain some of those differences that we see in realization rate for these individual measures. The data collection for a sample of projects may be more feasible to roll out, given census rollout for this type of data collection may be more costly to facilitate. Okay, next slide. Before I move on to the next steps of the envelope measure evaluation plans, are there any questions I can help answer? Okay, let's move on to the next steps. So because program participation indicates the majority of customers install multiple envelope measures simultaneously, increasingly so since 2022, Cascade and ADM will conduct a second round of evaluation activities focused solely on those bundled measures. And the goal here will be to determine the interactive effects of iteratively bundling measures. So the first step, which we've completed and presented results for in this presentation, is to assess the isolated measure impacts. The second step is to estimate the observed savings of commonly bundled measures through a billing analysis. And the third step would be to calculate the difference in energy savings observed between the bundled measures and the sum of those isolated measures. So this will provide a magnitude adjustment for incorporating observed interactive effects of commonly bundled measures, which can be applied to future program year projects to estimate accurate observed energy savings for each of the projects based on which combination of measures they installed and in which order. So ADM and Cascade are currently in the process of this analysis and will share results in another advisory group meeting in the future. And yeah, we're expecting to get some results for that soon. I think that's the end of this. If there's no questions, then thank you so much for your time and allowing us to be part of this meeting. And we look forward to speaking with you all again soon.
Thank you so much, Melissa.
Thank you.
Overall, ADM have been really great partners, and we look forward to continuing our work with them on these bundled measures. We think that that analysis is going to be really useful to our program. And so if there are no final questions for Melissa, we can move forward.
Thanks, everyone. Happy to be here.
All right. Move on to the next topic, which it flows in very smooth. It's for our conservation potential assessment 2025, which is really coming down. We're almost done with it. I'll kick it over to Jody, but I also want to remind the group how important that EM&V is with ADM. It's been used to help inform the 2025 conservation potential assessment. And I anticipate those bundled measures will help us inform likely the 2027 conservation potential assessment. It's a continual iterative process and the data doesn't go stale for us. It's a pretty useful feature. So thanks everyone. Then I'll kick it over to Jody and Ken, I believe.
Yes, so we have Ken Walter from ICF. He will be presenting a progress update on our conservation potential assessment. As Ken said earlier in the introductions, ICF, formerly known as AEG, they have been our partners for our conservation potential assessment since 2019. And we have had significant progress since our last CAG meeting. And so Ken will share these latest developments with us. And additionally, there will be a draft report submitted to the CAG on May 1st. So Ken, go ahead.
All right, thanks, Jody. It's fun to do this with ICF branding. I got to get used to that. We could probably jump straight over to the rundown slide on this one. So first I'll cover just the basic objectives of the CPA for anybody who's less familiar with the process. I know for most folks this is old hat, but there's always somebody new in the room. We'll cover the overview of the methodology, the major model inputs and sources, how state and local policies impact the CPA, which is similar to last time, and what the major changes are for this round. We'll look at the base year market characterization and then talk about where we are in the timeline and what the remaining steps are. We can go ahead and step forward. All right. So in a nutshell, the conservation potential assessment is performed to identify the technical, economic, and achievable natural gas energy efficiency potential across all the sectors in Cascades territory. And there are some sort of sub-bullets that come in on that. First, we want to characterize all of the natural gas equipment, how that is moved through Cascades market, what is the current consumption by homes and businesses and industrial customers. We want to estimate the energy savings and the associated costs for energy efficiency measures across all these different permutations of sectors and segments and the different end uses. We want to carefully consider the impact of Washington energy codes on what's going on currently and into the future. And we do work with Cascade to do some sensitivity analyses after the main body of the CPA is over, especially to make sure that we can think about different market conditions or portfolio scenarios that are useful for Cascade's planning. And all of these results are done in a format that's ready to be modeled in Cascade's integrated resource plan. All right. So this is just a quick schematic of our energy efficiency analysis approach. We start on the far left with our measure list development. Even while we're still crunching numbers on current consumption, we're working with Cascade to develop a comprehensive measure list. Obviously, we want to include everything that Cascade is already offering, but also casting a wider net, looking at everything that's documented by Energy Star, RTF, the U.S. Department of Energy, NEA's technical documents, and even trying to look at, if anything is out there for emerging technologies that has data that we can actually characterize as a measure. It needs to have documented savings, costs, and expected lifetime, something that we can actually put into the model as opposed to just theories. In the upper track, we're also in parallel doing the market characterization, where we're starting with Cascade's actual sales data for the base year, in this case 2023. Disaggregating that down into the different market segments and end uses according to information that Cascade themselves have, NEA's surveys, the RBSA, the CBSA, and where needed to gap fill, we'll reach out to other regional or national sources as well, things like the 2020 Residential Energy Consumption Survey, the RECS, it's performed by Department of Energy, that can be shrunk all the way down to state-specific and isolated to gas users and becomes a very good backbone for any data that we don't already have through Cascade and NEA. At the same time as market characterization, we're doing that measure characterization where we're choosing the appropriate savings and costs and defining the applicable markets. Especially, again, we look at things like NEA's data for what is the remaining portion of building shells that, where these levels of insulation are appropriate. We want to make sure that we're defining that remaining group, according to whatever metrics are appropriate to each measure to identify the correct remaining market. Cascade's been operating their programs, NEA has their initiatives, Washington State Code is changing building shells. We don't want to either under or overstate to the best that we can what that available market is going to be. As we put those puzzle pieces together, we then perform a baseline projection. So this is not Cascade's official forecast. This is our bottom-up build-up of all consumption at the end-use level as we've characterized it, moving things forward through time to account for equipment turnover into current codes, looking at future standards that are already on the books, things like federal or state codes that change the available equipment or have, again, modifications to the building shell over time. And keeping track of the existing population as it declines in vintage. And then ordinarily, we would also track a separate new construction population, but as we'll see in some future slides, it's a little different in this CPA. Once we have the baseline projection, that gives us a stock turnover at all the different end uses and segment permutations, and that's then the basis for our potential estimates, where we can take the characterized measures, apply them to these base loads, and get, as I already mentioned, the different levels of potential, the technical, achievable technical, and achievable economic. And then later we'll work with Cascade to define those sensitivity analyses. So all of these phases include collaboration and feedback. It's been great working with Caleb and Jody in particular. But then we've also, as we get down through the estimates, we can bring other folks in from Cascade's side to look at how the top measures are rolling out and really make sure that we're getting everything as tight to and appropriate to Cascade's territory as possible. I'll pause there for just a second if there are any questions. I know there's a lot in that 10,000 foot overview. Yeah, Quinn.
I mean, I realize that asking this question is probably, you won't have a good answer, but I'll ask it anyway, which is that right now there's clearly a lot of uncertainty from multiple ends, particularly regarding, the cost of things and the Washington State building codes. How are you, and maybe you'll get into it on the next slide, but how are you kind of pricing that in or accounting for it in your sensitivities?
So the sensitivities aren't defined yet, so we'll be continuing those conversations with Cascade. Right now, the reference case for the CPA is under conditions as they were, as of January of this year, which, yes, we know a lot has moved around a bit, but you always have to draw a line at some point for when you stop turning the treadmill on major assumptions. I would agree with kind of the main thrust of that question that, Caleb, Jody, I think one of the sensitivities we will want to look at is some kind of a price shock scenario on measure costs, but those have not been defined yet, but we will work with Cascade on those.
Great, thank you.
Yeah. I don't see any others, so let's go ahead and move on to model inputs and sources. All right. So this is just an overview. This is not exhaustive, but it is, by and large, this probably accounts for 80–90% of the data that we have running through the models. It starts on the left with Cascade foundational data. The whole study really hinges on that. So we have the actual gas sales by the different rate schedules. We have current and forecasted count of customers congruent with the IRP. We also have some retail price projections and the utilities avoided costs, which is what really the cost effectiveness calculation is going to be based on. For defining the presence of equipment and where things are actually, in use and plugged in to consume gas, we again start with Cascade's data, which does have a customer database with equipment flags. They are not updated very frequently, so we align that with NEA surveys, the last 2 rounds of the RBSA, the most recent CBSA, and as I mentioned, U.S. Energy Information Administration also does their own surveys, which are very useful as backfill for residential and commercial, and frequently a better resource for industrial gas loads. The MEX gas loads by industry, we tend to find are a little bit easier to use than NEA's IFSA. Additional technical data on the end-use equipment costs and energy consumption is coming from RTF, where they have covered a given technology, or power plan workbooks. Most recently, 2021 power plan, but also AEG is currently doing some work on the future. So if any of those measures were relevant and had the best data, we would pull some of that. Plenty of DOE data, Energy Star technical data sheets, and then we also do frequently consult EIA's annual energy outlook. We do get access to their internal modeling files where they have, again, specifics on costs and measure loads, and then we have a similar decision modeling system for the purchases when we use it. For energy codes and standards, of course, the main thing is the Washington State Energy Code. Again, yeah, it does adjust from time to time. There's federal energy standards, actually not listed here, of course, are the local regulations, which are discussed a little bit on the next slide. In places like Bellingham that do not allow new connections of gas lines. And then in terms of the baseline, we also want to include market trends and effects. So if RTF has information on what is the baseline efficiency mix, we don't want to say our all potential is going to come against minimum code and standard, because in reality, people do tend to buy a mix, even if they don't have an incentive. Some folks are out there actually looking at their wallets and going, maybe this actually works for me. So we do try and capture that where it exists in past sales data, whether that's from, again, the annual energy outlook, which is calibrated to purchase trends, RTF market baseline, and not listed here, but also Energy Star maintains their own sales tracking, and we inform this modeling with that. All right. So let's take a little closer look at the state and local policies. So gas growth is constrained in Cascades territory. The explicit ban on natural gas at the state level is not in effect. That was removed by legislation, but community level guidance is still not allowing new customers in several locations that Cascade knows. At the same time, in terms of just general gas consumption, the building envelopes continue to improve just as a function of the overall Washington code. Either existing properties do decay and get a little bit of renovation, or any new buildings that are built are going to be on that, although, as we've just discussed, probably not on natural gas. And then in terms of customer fuel choices, again, there's plenty of pressure as far as electrification and the use of heat pumps. So as the summary down below says, this is, again, consistent with Cascade's IRP. We are assuming no new construction in the residential and commercial sectors. So everything that you're going to see coming out of the CPA is going to be based on existing buildings only in those two sectors. Byron, his hand is up.
Yeah, thank you. I apologize for kind of jumping to this meeting a bit late. I guess, could you talk briefly about like what the experiences have been around like the building codes and the interaction with 2066 in terms of like, it passed and then, it was in the courts and then the court said it's not, and then it's on review. Like, how are you guys kind of like working and grappling with that and considering that?
As far as the CPA is concerned, our inputs are just designed to be consistent with the IRP's projection, which is currently no new construction in those two sectors, which at least makes our modeling easy. When it comes to how the IRP group is resolving those, I would refer that question to Cascade's IRP team.
Okay, I was just wondering if there's any particular, I guess from like a conservation standpoint, if you guys have like, I guess this is more of a question for Caleb, whether that, like working with like new construction or like, people who are doing this on the ground, like what that kind of like frustration feels like, if you guys can speak to that.
Yeah, very fair question, Byron. I'll share some thoughts. I know we have a resource planning team, they perhaps share some of the data behind it. But you're exactly right. Regardless of the code being there, approved, declined, turned over, being stayed, the actual data that we're seeing is our new homes are almost irrelevant in the program. Back in 2020, it was a pretty significant part of our program. Off the top of my head, this is not a quote. It was about 1,000 measures that we did in new homes. A lot of times they were pretty consistent year over year. Last year, I believe it was around 8. So it's a huge drop off, huge decline, and what we're experiencing is consistent with the assumptions that are in the CPA here. In terms of the frustration, we have very rare, from my understanding, customers reaching out asking about it. Sometimes we do have questions in regards to what they're available for. We updated our incentive sheet to be very clear. These are for new homes. These are for only existing homes. That seems to answer quite a bit of it. But then we also have our specialist team who's pretty adept at answering those questions. We get a lot of them, but a lot of them do follow similar paths from my understanding.
Okay. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah. Resource planning team, anything else we want to add or talk about this?
Hey, yeah, this is Brian. No, we're definitely keeping an eye on the impacts that all of these changes are having. That's one of the big reasons in the IRP as to why we've tried to model different growth scenarios. Yeah, it's difficult to say what the impacts will be at this time. But yeah, we plan on keeping an eye on it and trying to keep our finger on the pulse.
Thanks, Brian.
Okay, would you like to move to the next slide?
Yeah, I think that's a good discussion to have, though. So thanks everybody who chimed in there. All right. So just a couple of updates to call out some notable changes from the previous CPA that are affecting results. With every cycle, we want to use the latest and best information, especially coming from the resource planning team. So I just wanted to call out that the average avoided cost per therm has gone up compared to the previous CPA by about 15%. Average over the 20-year CPA term is $1.27 a therm, which is pretty high. That is, of course, including social cost of carbon. And then in terms of weather data, this is a change from previous CPAs, which have assumed constant normal weather throughout the cycle. Again, consistent with resource planning assumptions, this model is using, it's about an 11% decline over the 20-year period in heating degree days. So that has a pretty good effect on both the baseline consumption and on the available savings that are on these space heating measures out in that future. And then I'd just like to highlight how many permutations of measures actually get run through this thing. So it's over 5,000 individual permutations once you look at all of our different segmentation and characterizations that the team gets to go through. It's 157 individual measure names, but once you work those out across all the different assumptions that we need to make. And this is using the latest available data from RTF, the NEA surveys, some applicable state TRMs from out of the region that deeply investigate natural gas. A couple of the good ones are Illinois TRM, Minnesota TRM. Anything that we use from outside the region like that obviously has to come over with consideration of Cascade's climate in particular. So we'll frequently use their savings algorithms, but then plug in information that's appropriate to Cascade's territory to do that. Okay. So having talked about how we get here, I do want to share just a quick baseload characterization. This is not extremely detailed. Oh, yeah, go ahead, Brian. Byron,
yeah, could you go back one slide?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm seeing that you guys are having an increased avoid cost, but also a decrease in heating degree days. So just in terms of like working with trade allies and like have you guys seen any like change in terms of like which measures are still cost effective, or like a change in like how you guys want to prioritize measures and stuff? Because it sounds like that would kind of shift the emphasis being on ones that are not seasonal, if that makes sense. And or maybe maybe like the seasonal ones are still a lot more cost effective. Like, does that change any of that kind of like internal calculus or how you guys work with your trade allies to emphasize different measures?
Ken, you can speak to the
you can go ahead and take that one if you like, Caleb.
Yeah, I think the intuition makes a lot of sense, Byron. From our actual program perspective, and Stephanie knows on the call, she can speak if anything I say is not quite accurate. But our most popular measure by far is attic insulation and air sealing for residential retrofits with a certain R value, I believe below R19 previously. It was proposed in the last BCP that those measures had somewhere between a 5 and a 7.0 UCT cost effectiveness ratio. So even if things ceteris paribus tripled, they would still be cost effective. So I don't think it's really impacting how we're actually going after measures, other than the ones that are the most cost effective. We can typically offer a very large and robust rebate for it, oftentimes covering up to or near the full installed dollar amount. So oftentimes money talks, and we're seeing that happen with the program. Ken, did I miss anything there with the modeling perspective?
No, I think that's a fair assumption. I think it'll also come a little clearer when we show the next couple slides on the baseline. So it is a decline in the space heating loads, but it's not like a catastrophic. It's not precipitous. So like Caleb said, a lot of these measures are very strongly cost effective. There aren't too many that are on the bubble. And the majors in particular, at most, maybe a small adjustment to the incentives would be necessary. But yeah, we're still doing that final review with them. Again, we'll get down to the timeline section, but that's actually currently the process. We're in the final stages, which are really just sitting down with the people who have boots on the ground in the programs and saying, okay, does it make sense if this measures at the top? If anything did fall off cost, I can't think of anything that actually fell off cost effectiveness that you guys are already running, Caleb. So yeah, we're in the process of squinting at all the beans.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah, another good question. Any others, or we'll move on to some of the base load characterizations and kind of some interesting topics, actually. Moving on.
Oh, jumbled my data labels.
Sorry, I apologize.
That's okay. So this is a snapshot of load in 2023. The interesting things to call out here, number one, is that Cascade's load is almost evenly split between residential and non-residential, although with the caveat that this industrial slice does not include transport loads. This only includes gas delivered by Cascade. And on the right, the pie chart by end use, probably not going to shock anyone to learn that most natural gas is used for space heating, either primary or secondary, with water heating coming in. And I think it is worth pointing out that commercial food service is basically tied with water heating as an end use. So Byron, that could be one call out to think of, is that over time, especially if the water heating and space heating loads contract even just a little bit, the prominence of that commercial food service will come up by extension. Speaking of the non-seasonal loads. All right. And then we can look at the overall baseline by the sectors, and this will kind of illustrate what I was talking about on the next slide there. There we go. Oh, that really shrank. I forgot you guys do this in 4:3. I apologize for sending you a 16:9 slide deck, Caleb. So it's a little harder to see in that version, but you can still kind of see it's that 11% decline in heating degree days translates to a pretty gentle slope down overall. And the primary drivers here, aside from the weather itself, is just the turnover of vintage equipment into things that are at minimum code compliant, and if we have information to define it, may include some above code efficiency. People who are going to buy a 90% furnace on their own, for example, instead of federal minimum 80%, things like that. Again, we have tried to capture federal codes in here. As of the time of this modeling, the federal furnace standard is still on the books, which converts everything to a minimum AFUE 95 starting in 2029. And then that's in residential specifically, and a handful of others that affect gas tankless water heaters, although it looks like the presidential administration just removed that efficiency change. So again, we're keeping track of that very squirrely market. Really, I'm just going to say watch the CPA report. It will have the final documentation on what standards are actually included in the modeling and what date we cut that off. And that is about as precisely as I can speak to it during any given news cycle. All right. Okay, so as mentioned, we'll talk about remaining timeline. So just to call it out, we are not sharing potential right now because we are still going through that process with Cascade. It is a pretty continuously evolving conversation just on what programs are actually achieving and either where we can push on things or need to make adjustments. But we are finalizing the potential, including any feedback by April 25th. We are sharing the very preliminary draft report with Cascade actually by the end of this week so that they can make sure that everything they want to show is included in there. We're answering all the questions that we can preemptively think of, and that draft report will be shared with stakeholders by May 1st. And then the final report that will include any feedback that we get on that draft or interim updates if necessary to the CPA itself will be out by May 30th. All right. Well, thank you very much. I always love coming to these, talking about what we do and the great data that we get from Cascade and the collaboration that we have with them. So, and I will hand it back over.
Thank you so much, Ken, and thank you to the entire ICF team for their continued hard work on this assessment. Being able to incorporate both our most recent EM&V results that Melissa shared with us today, along with prior EM&V results that we have filed, makes us even more confident in the analysis that ICF is completing. And so we're really excited to complete this project and to share our final results with you. This final therm savings potential that we're working towards is so vital to our program, and these results will be able to inform how we plan for the next biennium. So thank you so much. Caleb, I don't know if you have any other comments?
Nope, that's fantastic. Just everyone in this group, please look out for that report here in about 2 weeks. We'll send it off. We'll ask for about a 2-week, comment review period for us to incorporate, and then things get filed on time around here. So that'll be the plan. All right. And our next topic, actually, we're going to take a brief intermission here. We're going to take just a 5-minute intermission, so kind of a weird time, but we'll say right around 10:22 a.m. we'll return, something like 20 to 30 minutes of content here. So we're still plenty of time remaining. All right, I'll put in the comments. We'll see everyone right around 10:22 a.m. Okay, I've got 10:22, I believe, on my clock. Bailey, I'll just ask you if you can give me a thumbs up or something if you're back and ready to go. Excellent. All right, that's my cue. We're moving on to another good piece here. This is a follow-up to the conservation potential assessment. Ken with ICF did a great job of overviewing and demonstrating, and I think he mentioned one of the most important pieces is the avoided costs. So I figured we'd have our resource planning team, some of our experts here, including Bailey Steves, give just a quick 10-15 minute overview on what the avoided costs are, how they're calculated, what goes into them, so that way some questions or education can be shared. I'll kick it over to you, Bailey, if you're ready.
All right. Hi, everyone. I'm Bailey Steves. I'm on the resource planning team, and I'm going to be going over Cascade's avoided costs methodology. So to start looking at an overview of our avoided cost forecast, philosophically, we do a 27-year price forecast to allow us to get up to 45 years of avoided costs. And specifically, we want to focus on those costs up to 2050 because that's going to allow us to get as accurate as one can going out for a 27-year forecast. So what is the avoided forecast, or the avoided cost, I'm sorry. It's the estimated cost to serve the next unit of demand with a supply side resource at an option in time. So it's the counterweight to the cost associated with our energy efficiency programs. So for example, let's say it's going to cost 50 cents per therm to install a more efficient water heater. The avoided cost would need to be higher than that for it to be considered a cost-effective resource, with some caveats. And you can look at a more holistic portfolio analysis, and there's also certain measures that are exempt from the cost-effective analysis, but the scope of avoided cost is limited to addressing just these measures. So basically, the avoided cost is the counterpoint to the energy efficiency analysis when you're trying to do that cost-benefit relationship. And this incremental cost to serve represents the cost that could be avoided through energy conservation. So it can be used as a guideline. It's used to compare energy conservation with the cost of acquiring and transporting natural gas. So avoided cost covers from beginning to end, starting from the minute the gas is purchased to the minute it's used at our customers' homes or businesses. Every step along the way, we want to capture all of the costs to create a holistic picture of what the cost to serve is so that it can be compared to the cost of energy efficiency. You can go to the next slide, please. Yeah, so here's the formula for our avoided cost calculation. As you can see, there's several different factors that go into it, and I'm going to break down each one in the following slides just to make it more consumable. And the nominal avoided cost can be converted to real dollars, and we do that by taking it divided by 1 plus the discount rate to the number of years from our reference year. So that's going to be real 2024 dollars. Go to the next slide. So starting with transportation costs, there's a cost to both reserve the capacity to flow our gas on a pipeline, and then there's the cost for every therm that we do flow. And we can't avoid the fixed cost to reserve the capacity because we've already reserved it and it's in place. And it's going to be in place until the contract expires, but we can avoid not flowing on that contract. And that variable cost or the transportation cost is avoidable. And also different upstream pipelines are going to charge different rates for their variable costs. So since we are concerned with the marginal cost of the next therm that flows, we're going to take an average of these pipelines' variable rates since we don't know what pipeline that therm will flow on. The one time that fixed costs are potentially avoidable is if we needed to acquire new capacity. So for example, let's say in Bremerton, we needed to be able to get more transportation to that specific city gate from an upstream perspective. What we would do is go out to Northwest Pipeline and explain that we're going to need more capacity over there. They would give us a quote to help build an expansion, and then we can convert that cost to what the cost would be on a per therm basis. And that theoretically would be an avoidable cost. And if we thought we might need that, that potential cost for the expansion, both the fixed and the variable, would be an avoidable cost because it could theoretically be avoided or at least deferred. And anytime you can defer a project, there's value in that, mainly just from the time value of money, since spending in the money in the future is more ideal than spending money today. Because if you had the money today, you could potentially invest it, and then you'd get whatever your rate of return is on it. Going to storage. Thank you. Now for storage costs, only the variable costs are really avoidable. So once again, it's only included if it's avoidable. And storage for Cascade is actually an interesting one because we don't have any on-system storage. So if you guys are more familiar with Northwest Natural, for example, they have their MIST facility, which is where they're able to take gas from and put it right on their Portland distribution system. We don't have that, so storage for us is mostly just a price arbitrage and a peak day resource. So from an avoided cost perspective, storage costs typically don't come into play. The exception would be if we needed to build on-system storage, an on-system storage facility for whatever reason, maybe to serve peak demand. If all of a sudden we had some opportunity to do that, there could be some avoided costs with that because it would hook right into our distribution system, but we don't have that, so you can expect this value to be 0. So for Cascade system right now, all storage is off system and it provides a net positive benefit to customers, so it doesn't qualify as an avoided cost. And just to explain that a little bit with a little bit more detail, Cascade fills its storage assets during the non-heating season when gas prices are significantly lower than in the winter. And when performing a life cycle analysis of a therm that is purchased from a basin, stored in the summer, and then injected in the winter, the cost savings of that summer-winter spread far supersedes any costs associated with the storage of that therm, which explains what I said earlier, that it's a net positive and not a cost that you'd be able to avoid. Moving to commodity costs. Commodity costs come from a price forecast, and during the 2023 IRP tag process, there were questions about whether this represented Cascade's marginal commodity costs, and some stakeholders brought up the idea of RNG being a more accurate representation of Cascade's marginal commodity cost. But when you're evaluating the cost of RNG, it's important to separate the physical gas molecule from the environmental attributes. And this is because the avoided cost from the environmental attributes is already captured in the environmental compliance cost element of the avoided cost. So including it in here would be double counting that cost. The physical gas molecules are typically valued at the basis price of one of the basins Cascade purchases gas from, which aligns with Cascade's current methodology of using its price forecast to capture avoided commodity costs. Moving to environmental compliance, thank you. We have the social cost of carbon with a 2.5% discount rate adjusted to real 2021 dollars, which is meant to capture that cost of compliance with it. But with the passing of the Climate Commitment Act, Cascade believes it may be more accurate to utilize the company's marginal compliance cost associated with this rule. An example of this would be the projected cost of CCA allowances. Oh, you can move to the next slide, please. Thank you. So we'll talk about distribution costs for a little bit. So in the past, we would use margin as the analog for distribution costs, with the logic being that the margin portion of our tariff would account on a per therm basis to some extent for those expected future growths. And after talking with some other companies, including our sister company, IGC, we decided to move away from that and really only look at capital expenses, which should theoretically be a partial part of the margin anyway. And the capital expenses are those expenses specifically related to growth. So we've got our capital budget, and we cut out things like system integrity, which are an unavoidable cost, and really only look at growth-related costs. We also look at the load forecast to see what our expected peak day growth is, and taking that peak day growth and a per therm basis plus the growth related costs, we should be able to get a dollar per therm figure for avoided distribution costs. But what's really important to, Byron, did you have a question?
You can finish this section. My question is about the environmental compliance costs. So once you're done here, we can go back a slide.
Sure. Okay. So I was saying what's really important is to realize that very rarely are you going to ever be able to fully remove the need for distribution system enhancement. And I'll give an example. If theoretically in the Tri-Cities we had a lot of projects, and even with energy efficiency, the need was rather significant, we may be able to theoretically push back a year or two on that system enhancement, but we're still ultimately going to continue to have a lot of growth in those large growth areas. And you still need to be able to eventually handle all that growth, but there is that value for deferring the need to do a system enhancement. If I can avoid it today and instead do it in 2026 or 2027, there's again that time value of money that is that this deferral has value. So again, I could then take however much that I would need put towards a system enhancement today and put that towards an investment and eventually get whatever my rate of return is on that. And then use that now increased dollar amount towards the system enhancement at a later time. So all of a sudden I would have, by deferring a few years, extra money to put towards it, and there's value in that deferral. We want to capture that value, whatever it might be on a per therm basis, and that's basically the whole principle. And it's based on a peak day. It's multiplied by the ratio of peak day to an average day demand, because everything we've talked about is just kind of doing it on an average day basis, but being able to defer on peak days is more valuable for us because that's ultimately where the deferral is going to end up happening. Same thing with peak hour, because distribution system costs happen on an hourly basis or on an hourly analysis. The peak hour difference adds extra value to it, and so that's incorporated in our calculation. Yeah, Byron, did you want to go ahead with or did you want me to finish? I'm sorry, do you want me to finish this slide, or do you want me to wait till the end?
Yeah, feel free to finish this slide, and then we can go back to the environmental compliance costs.
Okay, I'm done with it, so you can go ahead.
Yeah, I guess I want to make sure I kind of understand what you're saying here. Like the intuition, I think makes sense. I want to make sure that I am understanding your the intuition here correctly. It's what you're saying is that we have these CCA costs, we have RNG costs, but we want to kind of like break up the RNG and say part of the RNG is the actual fuel going to people's homes, and part of it is these kind of green attributes of that fuel. And from a methodological or theoretical standpoint, we're going to put those green costs or those green attributes under the category of environmental compliance costs. Is that what you're saying? Just to make sure I'm understanding that right?
Yes. Yeah,
okay.
You have it.
And so I remember looking at the fuel costs, like the forecast for like RNG costs, and there's kind of like a lot of these different kind of like tranches of costs for different projects. Like some of them are comparatively cheap, being around like, I think it's like, and feel free if Brian wants to correct me on the numbers here, but they're around like $10 a therm. And then as you get higher up, because you obviously you would go for that low hanging fruit first, it starts to get fairly expensive, like $24 a therm, and all the way up from there. Like some of them are very extremely expensive. So when you guys are considering this from a marginal standpoint, are you guys taking these compliance costs and kind of averaging it out across the entire system? Or are you looking at, say, if we include an additional unit of demand, we have to get either CCA emission allowances associated with that, or we have to get this RNG at this marginal cost for the green attributes? Like, is that how you're looking at it, or are you kind of doing this averaging? Like, how exactly is compliance being factored in at the margin there?
Expand on that.
Yeah, so I think for Washington, most of the CCA cost is going to be the allowance cost, but then we try to look at the next highest or the lowest cost compliance measure, which would be the lowest cost RNG. Or whatever it is. If next time we do this, it's hydrogen, then it could be hydrogen. But yeah, we try to utilize our low carbon alternative fuels projections to implement for that CCA cost.
Okay. Yeah, I think the intuition about like splitting out the green attributes in that way versus the fuel costs, I think that intuition makes sense to me. So I appreciate that clarification.
Yeah.
On to the next slide about distribution system costs. Just to make sure, I just want to again make sure my intuitions on this are lining up here. If you guys are planning out effectively zero customer growth for commercial and industrial, or it's not, sorry, commercial and residential, sorry. Does that mean that largely in terms of like distribution system planning costs, in terms of like adding to that marginal analysis around avoided costs is effectively zero, or like how big of how much does this contribute to avoided cost?
Yeah, it would be effectively zero. We're not planning on really expanding necessarily.
Okay, thank you.
Good questions. Anyone else on this call? We can take a brief pause, talk about any of these topics we have so far. Otherwise, I think there's just maybe 2 or so slides left.
Yeah, I think we're on risk premium now. Yep. Okay, so for risk premium, in our past, our risk premium has always been either 0 or negative. So in the past, we've reached out to our AMA partner and we've asked if they could give us a theoretical quote to fully hedge our entire portfolio for the entire planning horizon, which was not realistic. But they were willing to do it, but it was a non-binding quote, and nobody would ever make that kind of risky investment. It was way too risky. So we've decided to change it up a bit, and this actually follows something similar to what Northwest Natural is doing, but we've kind of changed our philosophy a little bit from theirs. So we defined our risk premium as the difference between the impacts of an extreme upward price movement versus that of an extreme downward price movement. So due to the log normal nature of stochastic prices, the risk presented from rising prices is higher than that of falling prices. And by that of falling prices, I mean, if you were to hedge and prices fall, you do have a potential loss for that. While if you're unhedged, and energy efficiency can be looked at as a hedge from this perspective. If you're exposed to prices, the higher prices are more of a risk. So this analysis is used in a risk-adjusted price calculation. And that's kind of our philosophy on when we're trying to do risk-based quantitative analysis, similar to what Northwest Natural does. What we do is 75% of the deterministic results are weighted as such, and then 25% of the stochastic results. And it's a qualitative and we've been doing it for a few years. And we like that it weighs more heavily towards what you would expect to happen, but still gives credence to that unexpected element. So we do that similar process in that risk-adjusted price analysis calculation, and that's done to calculate the final risk premium. We can move to the next one. I think it's a little bit more on, the risk. premium. So like I just said, for the final calculation, we take that deterministic price, multiply it by 75%, and then we take the average of the 99th percentile on the first percentile price, weigh that by 25%, and then we take this risk-adjusted element minus what we would expect the prices to be, and that difference is ultimately what our risk premium is. And we like this because it captures the difference between expected pricing and the blend of deterministic and stochastic pricing, and it's consistent with some of our other processes. We use the same or the similar risk-adjusted methodology when we're doing our portfolio analysis for both serving demand, total system costs, and environmental compliance. Does anyone else have questions on that? Okay, I'm gonna move. I think this is the last slides really quick. So yeah, lastly, really quick, we have the preferential adder. It applies to all elements of the avoided costs as per W2C staff guidance, and it's still 10% as per NWPCC guidance. Any more questions on the avoided costs? That's the last slide I have for you guys on this. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, excellent. Thanks, Bailey. So hopefully some people on the call find this interesting. It's a nice in-depth look showing how much work and how much thought goes into the avoided costs. They're very important for our program. More avoided costs means perhaps more potential. Lower means we have to look at our portfolio a little bit more stringently. So there's pros and cons in each direction. All right, and we're moving on to, I believe, our second to last topic, which is our standard low-income weatherization update. Hopefully, Noemi or Sheila, if you're available on the call, I'll kick it over your direction.
Thank you, Caleb. And I will, these first slides, so I'll pass it to Sheila just to review over the program so far for the first quarter, and then I'll finalize with the last slides.
Okay. So we're on track for probably about 100 jobs this year. We have 24 completed to date. Everything's going very well, and the agencies are well engaged. I want to draw your attention to the range in cost of products. Sorry about the dog. As the project costs continue to increase, we had one that was over $52,000 in reimbursement, and I just want to mention that when we invest in a home like that, we're restoring the home for habitability, so it's probably going to last for another 100 years or so. Some people get alarmed about the cost, but you can't build for 52. So we're taking a home that's inadequate and possibly inhabitable and making it a positive experience for the homeowner and the client. So we're continuing along at kind of an average of 4 measures per project, a couple hundred therms per project, and our average cost is $25,000. So do I have any questions? Any questions I can answer or clarify about this? Very good. Well, I'll hand it back to Noemi. Oh, well, here we go. We have a memorandum of understanding with each agency at the beginning of the program year, and we ask them to estimate how many homes they'll do in the calendar year, how many they will complete. And this table just gives us an array of what the memorandums have stated. Some of them are still in process. The Kitsap Community Resources hasn't turned any in yet, but as you can see, we have a robust numbers for OIC in the Yakima Valley and Opportunity Council up in Northern Washington. And it's an estimate so that everybody can see what's going to happen. Both sides, Cascade and the agencies. There's no penalties if they don't achieve the numbers, but we like to stay on track. Questions about this slide? Very good. All right, Noemi, back to you.
Perfect. Thank you, Sheila. So just an update, in the last CAG, we had shared that we had a proposal going around for the pilot program for the weatherization incentive program. So it's, in general, it's the same as our regular standard program that Sheila just shared, that we work with the agencies. The difference is that we'd have a third party implementer for this weatherization incentive program to serve the overflow that we've had from customers in weatherization for income qualified customers coming from the CARES program, the bill assistance program. So since the last meeting, the pilot has been approved. It was approved at the end of February. We are going through the contractor selection process. We put together a bid sheet, which essentially is similar to what the agencies use with any of their contractors. Any and all costs that are covered for this program were incorporated into that bid sheet and sent out to contractors in order to get an idea of what the cost is going to look like per project, per measure, and then use that information to base our decision for contractor selection for this new pilot program. Essentially, we still are trying to stay, cost effective and cost per unit. As Sheila noted, we've seen up to $50,000 projects. So we want to make sure that we're being good stewards of funds and selecting appropriately. And also with these bid sheets, once they're turned in and the contractor is selected, essentially it's locking in those prices for the program year. So we shouldn't see any unexpected increases unless it'll be more of a case-by-case situation, and having to have prior knowledge, at a minimum 30 days of any increase that might happen or unexpected increases there. As soon as we select or receive all of those bid sheets back, we'll go through a meeting to discuss which contractor is going to work best for the delivery of this pilot program. As soon as that's done, we'll issue our agreements and have them in place for the program year, and we can kick off the pilot program. Since we already have all of our customer base for this pilot program, we really are just waiting to finalize the contract selection process and kind of hit the ground running and start serving these customers. It's been waiting for a couple of years now almost. So that's really the only update that we have there. Hopefully in the next quarter meeting, we have a lot more updates there and what's going on in that pilot and how many customers, if any, we've served to date. And if there aren't any questions, I'll pass it back to Caleb. Yeah, Shay.
Hey, Noemi. So yeah, question about in terms of bids, how many do you have a good response of bid sheets that you've gotten back so far, or do you have a deadline of how long you're keeping your bid window open?
We haven't received the bid sheets back. They did go out early last week. We haven't received it yet. There is about 5 different contractors that had shared interests. So all of those bid sheets were sent out. We are doing follow-up hopefully this week. We didn't give a specific deadline on the bid sheet. We were hoping to have a quick turnaround. So if we don't see the quick turnaround this week, then we will give a cutoff date for the actual bid sheets. We don't plan to have it open an extended amount of time since we already did. We started essentially the RFP process early on, where we did very soft touches to or outreach to contractors. All of them were under the BPI website, sending out information noting that we were looking for contractors. So we had been having communication for a few months before then, and these really are the final contractors that really continued to follow up as prior to the program being approved.
Okay, great. And then can you, based on the contractors that are on the short list that you're hoping to engage, do they range the full spectrum of Cascade's service territory? Like, would they be able to serve all the corners of the state?
Yep, they are. We have some on the west side, and then we also have here localized in the area. And then there's a couple of them that are actually outside of the state, but they have they work with local contractors in the area all across our service territory. There is currently a contractor that we work on other pilots for Cascade that also serve for weatherization that had some interest there. But the plan is, for the most part, all the contractors that we've had, the ones on the west side would essentially just be on the west side. They have shared that they have the ability to travel, and of course, they would need additional costs covered for any travel and contractor expense as such. However, we do the same thing for agencies where we cover their contractor expenses when they do need to travel further locations to reach those service territories that are easily accessible.
Awesome. All right. Yeah. Thank you. This doesn't have to be like a within the CAG necessarily, but I would love to follow up with you when you do have your bid process completed so we can chat more. I just for in-depth stuff. I don't want to take up everyone's time.
Okay. Sure thing. I'll let you know. Thanks.
All right.
Thank you, Caleb.
Thank you. This is an exciting update. I know this is a kind of a long time process here that we're starting to see it come to fruition. It also is a good opportunity to remove some of the bottlenecks here and serve more of our in need customers. So great update. Thank you, Noemi. It also was a great way to segue into that pilots are on our table, and pilots are difficult. That's one of the reasons we do them, try and figure out how to maneuver through the pilot and have the most either potential in the near term or in the short future term. The one that the residential prescriptive program has been focusing on for the last handful of years is the home energy reports. I've just got one slide here to summarize this process and where we're at. I've been sharing updates, I think, quarterly here. So a lot of this likely is not new, just a setup for it. But those in the call recall we've been running this pilot with home energy reports to influence, persuade different behaviors from these targeted customers, right around 9,000 residential customers in our service territory. We sent a report out in draft form to this group probably about a month and a half to 2 months ago or so, summarizing the results. According to Brilliant, of course, as a prudency from our team, we are having it being vetted by a third party currently, and that's also ADM Associates, the same team with Melissa, who shared earlier in some of our other EM&V projects. So that's underway. Right now, I don't have a specific or solidified plan for the future with that. It's going to be pending the results of that M&V. However, I'm anticipating either as an ad hoc basis or during our next quarterly meeting, have some plans for the future with that, which is exciting. Okay, and the last slide here. This is probably the most important, but also the most difficult for me to share. It's a thank you to Carrie Buren. I'm hoping she's on the call. I know she had to step out a bit earlier today, so hopefully she's back. But I want to call out and say thank you specifically to Carrie Buren. I think some people on the call may know, some may not, but she'll be retiring here in just over a month, I believe, near the end of May. And 10 years of just awesome contributions, just being a steward for the program, for the customers, for our funds. It's hard for me to summarize in just some words here, but I know I personally think of Carrie as one of our main technical contributors, question asker, truth seeker. She was involved in the pilot that I just had on the previous screen here. I know she's been deeply involved with the RTF, Regional Technical Forum, some of the carbon consortiums. I know she's worked on the MDU, or corporate companies, eco programs. I know specifically in Idaho, and call it a past life, working with some of the weatherizations and some of the programs, kind of to what Noemi just talked about. I'm sure I'm missing a ton here, but Barry, if you're on the call and you'd like, you can turn your mic on, your camera on, whatever you'd like to say. Otherwise, I just want to say thank you. I'm sure it's thanks for everyone else as well.
Wow. Well, thank you. Yes, it's been called out that I maybe have more passion than is is really warranted around some of these things. But I'm a triple E energy efficiency enthusiast, and I'm unabashed about that. And I've had a terrific run here with Cascade Natural Gas. And I've just been blown away by the work that over the past 2 or 3 years that Caleb and every single individual in the Cascade team, energy efficiency team, has brought to a synergy that has really moved us forward almost in a step function. So I thank you all for the privilege of working alongside of you and wish you all the best in the future.
That's wonderful. Thank you, Carrie. And I'm sure we've got a little more time to spend with Carrie here. We're working on a bunch of some of our projects and the transitions that we're working on. Carrie described herself as kind of the supervisor of the factory floor to me recently. I'm like, man, that's what a great euphemism. Of sometimes it's easy to think a lot of us are processing, doing things, working with customers, typically more than 5,000 in a given year. It's not magic. It happens because of a factory making the production happen. And I know Carrie's been a big part of the vision, the leadership for that. So thanks to Carrie, thanks to your team. We're being left in a great spot, and I'm expecting good things in the future. And just a quick wind down slide. Those that know, we have our next meeting on July 16th on a quarterly basis. We'll send out the agenda about a week or so in advance like normal. I know we had Kai on the call here earlier that's joining us for the first time. If there's anyone else on the call who doesn't have this invite, or maybe you know someone in the industry that should be invited, let us know. We'd love to have them. The more robust the conversation, makes it more worth our time to do these. So just a specific request. Thank you. And thanks for joining today. If you got any questions, reach out either to myself or a specific presenter directly if you'd like. And then, enjoy the rest of the day.